It's a little after 4 o'clock. It's my honor to call this meeting to order. And the first for the Metropolitan Council, February 26th, 2020. First item is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is adopted. The next item is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thanks. Second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion, corrections, amendments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The minutes are adopted. And now get to the point of public invitation, where people, interested persons can make comments on items that are not on the agenda. And we have a person who can come forward, Lang Xiang. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but if you would keep your comments to within 3 minutes, we're all ears. Welcome.
Welcome, Met Council. Thank you for having me up here today. I am just here to share with you a little bit of what I've experienced in the last 10 months. I am a 12-year network systems administrator in the IT field, and I got here without a college degree. Barely got my GED at the age of 25. I worked very hard to get to where I am today. I traveled to over 30 rural cities and towns in the metro area asking one question: what's your greatest struggle? I went over to small businesses, city halls, councilmen, all that stuff. And my whole goal in all of this was to hopefully find the answers as to why there was such a gap in our education between people of color and all that other stuff. What I found was up at the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, two very senior and prominent individuals, 89 years old each. I won't mention their names, but they raised 150 Native American kids themselves, foster children, all of them. People would come by, ring their door, and leave the kids at the front doorstep. And I was shocked. And then I remember being born here in Riverside, Cedar over there, and how many Native Americans were there at that time. Growing up, now they're all gone. My whole point in all of this is, who's next? Right? And for me, I'm Hmong American. I was born here, a citizen, in Minnesota. My parents arrived here in 1987. Three months later, they had me. It's very fortunate. And so I'm really more concerned about an overall group of millennials. By 2030, we will have 4 baby boomers for every 1 millennial. And today, in the United States, individuals between the ages of 25 and 35 are dying faster than individuals 65 to 75. That's in the United States as a whole. That's a problem, especially when the top 3 reasons for death is car accidents, drug overdoses, and suicides. We're killing ourselves. Minnesota has the opportunity to fix that. We have a lot of opportunity zones, a lot of open land, and quite frankly, the entire millennial community that has not been tapped into yet. Every time I go to these meetings, I come here quite a bit. I don't know if those of you who remember me, I know I spoke with Tara and some of you on the phone. I played the role of a regular millennial where my mind is scattered all over the place. Boom, boom, topic this, boom, boom, topic that, but that was on purpose. We're not very welcomed when it comes to speaking our minds. We're not very controlled. We're not very focused. It takes a long time to listen to us. But that's the point. You gotta listen. Stop talking about us. Start talking to us. We have a lot of ideas, and yet we don't see very many here. I'm really concerned about it. Because we're gonna be the ones taking over those jobs that are gonna be retiring by 2030. $15 trillion, I believe, in the United States is gonna be changing hands from them to us. And yet we're not even ready. We're dying. We're nowhere near that. At my age, our graduation rate was 53%. when I graduated high school. I didn't graduate high school. I got my GED at age 25. I was a very different person. And I think the solution is simple. Stop saying no. Start saying yes. Simple. I think that'll fix our ridiculous murder and crime rate here in St. Paul. Teach them how to use guns and not tell them, no, you cannot use guns, because those individuals that are shooting guns today, they had no idea that gun was that powerful. That's the first time they've ever shot it. Go ask them. I have. They regret it. If they knew how powerful that gun was, they wouldn't have never shot it to begin with. They're just being egged on by their friends because, hey, he said something about you. You better go do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment, and you are always welcome to our council meetings. Thank you. We're now going to the business part of the agenda, and specifically the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? And if not, is there a motion to and a second to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All right. Any discussion? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The consent agenda is approved. We're now going to the reports of the standing committee, and I see Councilmember Lilligren is not sitting there, but Councilmember Vento will make the report. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item 2020-57 is the Now Then 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Now Then is located in the northwestern part of Anoka County. Thrive designates the city as rural residential, with the eastern portion designated as diversified rural. A special law was passed in 2018 that indicates that, quote, the Metropolitan Council shall conform its Metropolitan Development Guide, system plans, and the system statement for the city of Now Then to implement any changes requested by the city relating to the council's designation of part of or all of the city for purposes of the Metropolitan Development Guide, system plans, and statements, and the city's comprehensive plan. Therefore, the plan proposes to change the diversified rural portion to rural residential like the remainder of the community. The city's plan was reviewed under these directives. As such, council staff find that the 2040 plan conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies with proposed changes to the community designation, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. 1, authorize the city of Now Then to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect. 2, revise the community designation of the eastern portion of the city to rural residential as shown in Figure 3 and in accordance with the Chapter 214, Article 2, Section 46 of the 2018 regular session of the legislature. And finally, 3, advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for surface water management, land use, and plan implementation.
I'll second that.
Second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 2020-57 is adopted. Councilmember Bento, are you taking the next?
I am.
Please.
Mr. Chair, members of council members, this action is to approve the 2020 Annual Livable Communities Fund Distribution Plan. The Community Development Committee provided input to council staff on content of the fund distribution plan at its January 21st and February 3rd meetings before approving the proposed action at its February 18th meeting. The council members Wolf, Lindgren, and myself joined staff outside of the committee meeting to have a more detailed discussions about key features in the plan. And I'd like to acknowledge that the input that we received from several communities and metro cities aided us in our discussions and decisions. At this time, I'd like to invite Tara Beard, our Livable Communities Manager, to provide a presentation on the fund distribution plan for 2020.
Welcome, Ms. Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Again, my name is Tara Beard, and I'm the manager of the Livable Communities Unit in the Community Development Department. And just so that you know where this work comes from, we are required annually to determine a fund distribution plan for our Livable Communities Act programs as described in statute. And so I'm just going to give you a really quick highlight as to that process as we undertook it this particular year. Councilmember Vento just described the timeline exactly as you see before you on this slide, so I'll just skip past that and jump into the highlights of this year's fund distribution plan. The two big pieces of the fund distribution plan are how much money is going to be available for awarding and what is the schedule for that grant cycle. And so you'll see on these slides a combination of those two factors. The Livable Communities Demonstration Account is the largest grant fund program available in the LCA programs. There is an authorized budget of $6.8 million and an addition of reserves that is proposed in this fund distribution plan of $2.2 million. And that would total $9 million available in the Livable Communities Demonstration Account. And that's inclusive of pre-development awards as well. And as you see, the schedule kicks off in March. As soon as we adopt this fund distribution plan, we work on a notice of funding availability, and there's a process for design input, applications, and then, of course, CDC and full council recommendations. Within the Livable Communities Demonstration Account, there is a transit-oriented development category that's been in practice since 2011. And so from within the larger LCDA amount, $5 million is set aside for this program. That has felt right-sized in recent years, and so we are not proposing any addition of reserves to that award amount. As you can see the schedule before you, that there will be similar to the LCDA program, design workshops, applications, and in the fall, CDC recommendations and council awards. This is a map that's definitely not meant to help you get into the weeds of where there's eligibility for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Awards, but to show you from kind of a regional perspective the spread and the geographic ability to be eligible for TOD grants. So that's going to include areas around in the brown, I did something bad. The brown circles show, for example, areas around park and rides, and then the yellow and red lines show some of our established transit ways for bus rapid transit and light rail. In terms of how we score the LCDA and LCDA TOD programs, these just represent some tweaks and some criteria conversations that we've had this year, so that certainly shouldn't be seen as a comprehensive description of the scoring criteria for these programs. But some of the conversations we had this year was the elimination of housing performance scores from the funding criteria. How to talk about the importance of catalyzing additional investment while addressing fears, real and perceived, of gentrification and displacement. Talking about the importance of social and community connections and livability criteria, which focuses a lot on connectivity, but previously we've really talked about that in terms of connecting jobs to transit or affordable housing to jobs. And so really acknowledging kind of the human space and informal and social interactions that can make a place livable. Prioritizing project readiness more to address, issues sometimes with capacity for the projects that are proposed. And then being more specific and more consistent across our grant programs about what we're looking for community engagement when we score on that feature, and what demonstration value means and how we expect awardees to communicate anything learned. I had mentioned that the LCDA and LCDA TOD both have pre-development awards. Within those larger awards, up to $250,000 is available once in the spring and once in the fall for those two pre-development awards. And in terms of scoring criteria changes for the pre-development, we really wanted to provide additional clarity that for pre-development grants, we wouldn't be necessarily scoring on deliverables because the point of the program is to be able to do feasibility and explore how the project could potentially meet livable communities demonstration account values and goals. And so just being clear on that, because some of the language in both our scoring and our application guides made it difficult to prioritize a pre-development project if it wasn't tied to some certain outcomes. And then similarly to the regular programs, improving the specificity of our criteria for community engagement and how we'll evaluate that. Moving on to the local housing incentives account within the Livable Communities Act. That is our account specifically and only for affordable housing preservation and new construction. That's a unique program within LCA in that we partner with Minnesota Housing and their consolidated request for proposals to be part of a larger table of funders awarding programs annually through the state. And so the schedule you see before you there is primarily does mirror the Minnesota Housing schedule for their consolidated RFP. Notably, we have $1.5 million and sometimes additional authorized budget amounts in LHIA that get us to 1.5, or in this case, because of a previously authorized budget amount, $2 million for LHIA this year. In the conversations with the CDC, the Community Development Committee, about using reserves to potentially fund programs, especially those that got so many more applications than there were funding capability. There's a recommendation to add $2.5 million in reserves for a total of $4.5 million available in the LHIA fund for awarding this year. That is almost double any previous year's LHIA award offering. In terms of scoring criteria changes, we are going to make sure that a significant component of the project has to serve households with incomes at or below 60% of area median income. Previously, that cutoff had been 80% of area median income, and it certainly seemed time with the need that we don't even consider funding projects if they are not primarily serving folks at least 60% AMI. We certainly prioritize projects that are serving folks earning much less. And then we also wanted to provide a little more context for prioritizing projects that provide a housing type that isn't currently available or serve a population not currently served in or near the project area. So being a little bit more, providing a little bit more context than just this amount of affordability, and previously there was only this amount of affordability, but what type? Is it senior housing? Is it supportive housing? And is that a particular need that isn't being met in that area? The tax-based revitalization account is our environmental investigation and cleanup program within LCA. That is offered twice throughout the year in a spring and fall cycle. The schedule you can see before you on the screen. There's an authorized budget in statute for the TBRA program of $5 million, and we're proposing an addition of $1 million in reserves. There's often more applications and funding available for TBRA, and a small portion of that, $250,000, is going to be available for a subcategory of TBRA seeding equitable environmental development, which has some unique features in it that we're going to be exploring how to increase the interest in that program. We've had decreasing interest, and that's why you see the small award amount, and we're going to be spending 2020 figuring out what kind of place-based equity programs that we can provide through TBRA, if any. And in terms of scoring criteria, some minor changes in the TBRA program, removing criteria prioritizing freight generating industries, as it just wasn't consistent with any other kind of prioritization projects, nor were we seeing any applications that really did so. And then removing criteria prioritizing green remediation practices. Again, the TBRA program is an environmental cleanup program. It provides remediation. This in particular was a criteria that said how you do the remediation. Are you even beyond that using green remediation processes to do green remediation? And essentially we weren't seeing any differentiation in applications. Folks are generally using the same green remediation practices as they do cleanup, or they aren't, and so it wasn't a valuable scoring criteria. Finally, here's a funding summary that goes into, provides a summary of the individual grant program funds that you saw in the previous slides. And just to kind of recap, and I probably should have predicated the funding slides with this, that, within the Livable Communities Act, there are statutorily authorized budget amounts that go into the LCA programs each year. Inevitably, there are times when projects aren't completed, funds are relinquished, and because money isn't deployed the second that it's awarded, we do have some interest earnings in those fund balance accounts. And so those are those reserves that are available sometimes for programming, additional programming beyond the base amounts, if you will, within statutory authority. So this summarizes that. What you see in the 2020 authorized budget slide is inclusive of what's allowed in statute, with the addition of the $500,000 that was authorized in the 2019 budget to add to the LHIA program. And then there are two types of additional reserves that can be programmed: restricted reserves, which are tied to a particular fund account, and unrestricted reserves that could be used to add programming to any of the funding accounts. And so when looking at where we have proposed to add additional funding and where it came from, you can see the use of both restricted and unrestricted reserves, with a remainder of, $3 million in unrestricted reserves and a little over $3 million in restricted reserves. So there is still funding in those, or dollar amounts in those funds that can be used. And excuse me, I wasn't keeping up with my notes pages. So I just need to mention on this slide as well that, again, the 18.8 million, that's the total of the top line there, is pass-through funding that is already in the authorized budget for 2020. Those reserve balances are available to fully fund the accounts that I've shared with you today from the fund distribution plan, and a future budget amendment will bring those reserves into the council's authorized budget. That's the summary of my presentation, if there aren't any questions.
Any questions? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you. Nice job.
Yeah.
I am curious about how on slide 11, and you talked about this, prioritizing projects that have less than 60% AMI. We know for those who are experiencing either homelessness or housing instability that it's 30% AMI is really like the target area of where we have the most need. How is that? What does prioritizing those projects look like? Does that show up in that they'd get a higher score, or what would that look like exactly?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, because the LHIA program is done as a part of this bigger consolidated effort, it is less of an internal scoring rubric that we use here and say, okay, this project will award this project and not this project. Often we are one of the smallest pots of money going into a development project, and so whether we do or don't fund it isn't the deciding factor in whether that project moves forward or not. And so that is a consideration. However, once we know through Minnesota Housing staff's review of where there are still gaps in the projects that they are planning to fund, then we can kind of apply our lens, and internally staff take a look at that and review using the priorities that are described in more detail in the FDP beyond just this. And to just be clear, this change is simply changing the requirement that we wouldn't even look at a project, we wouldn't even consider funding a project with LHA dollars if the majority weren't affordable at 60% of area median income. But we definitely prioritize projects that are affordable at 30% and below. There isn't an exact mathematic equation I can provide, but that is the lens that we use in scoring.
And then just one other question. I'm just wondering if there's any space. I'm trying to think about how do we work across kind of some of the silos that we create with our systems around supporting projects or encouraging projects to also have aspects of good water practices and management and conservation, things like that. Is there a space for communicating about those concerns and needs too as a part of these projects and dollar sources?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, we very much align those priorities in our LCDA and LCDA TOD and TBRA programs, many of which, probably more than half of which, are also for projects that include affordable housing. We don't currently use that lens in the LHIA review criteria. Again, it's kind of a component of the partnership within which we review the projects. And so by the time we are reviewing kind of where we would plug in our money. There's already been a lot of decisions about what projects are moving forward and not. We can certainly look into adding that question and talking to our partners at Minnesota Housing to ask for more information about those kinds of practices in the project. And then if that is a differentiating factor in the projects that kind of by the time that they get to us, then we can absolutely talk about prioritizing that.
Chair, if I could just one
Yes,
follow-up.
please.
I think that'd be great. I think a lot of times I've been seeing, especially in North Minneapolis, there's some truly affordable housing projects that go in, but the water management and conservation, and frankly, just the look of the grounds is not really pleasant, to be honest. So I think for all the good reasons we need for environmental sustainability, but also for the good reasons for having things that are really designed at a people, for people, to humanize them, I think would also be really great question to add. And it's valuable to just get a baseline of information to know where we're at with these things. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And whether through Minnesota Housing or when we are funding, and I think I know the answer to this, but does a link to supportive services help as well? You know, I know that's critically important, especially for 30% or under in ensuring some success more holistically for the residents. So would that be factored in as well through the process?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I know that Minnesota Housing's consolidated request for proposals, their application process absolutely factors that. And so we've really relied on their scoring process to prioritize that so that by the time the projects, the kind of projects that remain at the end of their review for us to look at, that's often been already kind of vetted. And it's in the time that I've participated, it's been very rare that social services that are connected to any grants for affordable housing that need them are not well described and a part of the application.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councilmember
finish up.
Vento, please.
As Tara stated, these amounts represent an historic addition of $2.5 million in program reserves to supplement the authorized budget for the local housing incentives account. This is a $2 million increase, $2 million more than any previous annual LHIA funding award since the Livable Communities Act was adopted in 1995. A reduction in the seating equitable economic development category to acknowledge consistently fewer applications than there is funding available. So this is, we as a committee are really excited about this proposal and proud of the work that the staff and the committee members did together on this. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council approve the 2020 Annual Livable Communities Fund Distribution Plan.
Second.
Second, thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just want to echo what Councilmember Vento said. You know, we're at a moment in time where we thought, you know, the money could sit there, we could put some more time, thought around it, but it really seemed like, especially with Tara's leadership and our whole team, that now is the time. And so I hope that we'll support this tonight, but I also think, you know, it's a message that we're sending through the region. This is the time to step up. This is time to be bold. This is the time to lean in. I'm hoping that it will inspire other sectors because the time is now. So I'm just really thrilled to be part of this as it moves forward.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Congratulations. Thank you, Tara. Excellent. And committee members, I share your pride. And the money doesn't help sitting in an account. It's deployed and working for us. So appreciate it. The Environment Committee, there is no report. But there is, and then the Management Committee, there were some reports in the consent agenda. So we're on to transportation. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2020-52 same week is related to the change order for project 17P185A, which is the Mall of America Transit Station renovations with Morcon Construction. Contract 17P185A was executed with Morcon Construction on June 25th, 2018. During construction, Department of Corrections requirements have been brought to Metro Transit's attention that require additional costs. With the facility now in use, challenges with radio communications have been identified due to difference in the building layout. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute a change order to construction contract 17P185A with Morcon Construction in an amount of $500,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Phil. Any discussion, questions? No? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2020-78, same week, is related to the Metro Mobility Demand South Zone Contract award to Transit Team for the term between August 1st, 2020 and July 31st, 2025, with an option to extend one additional year. The Metro Mobility Service Area has 3 geographic zones, west, east, and south, that are served under 3 separate service contracts. Each of these contracts were last executed in 2015 with a 5-year term and an option to extend by 1 year. This business item covers the entirety of service provided in the Metro South Zone beginning August 1st, 2020. A request for proposals was issued in November 2019. There were 11 plan holders. 3 proposals were received in January and evaluated by a 5-member panel composed of both council staff and external stakeholders from Washington County and the Minnesota Council of Disability. Following an evaluation process governed by state law, federal regulation, and council policy and procedure, Transit Team's proposal was ranked by the evaluation panel as having the highest rated financial submittals, the highest rated technical proposal, and the lowest proposed cost. Therefore, the panel recommended Transit Team as the proposer that would be the most advantageous to the council. The proposed pricing is within the budget and appears to be fair and reasonable. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a contract with Transit Team Incorporated to provide Metro Mobility Demand South Zone service from August 1st, 2020 to July 31st, 2025, with an option to extend 1 additional year in an amount not to exceed $100,778,685.
There's a second.
Second.
Thank you, Chris. Any discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Fitz.
I just wanted to share for the full council, for folks that aren't on the Transportation Committee, at the meeting on Monday, I voiced some concerns related to the impact on service and then specifically the workforce. These contracts come up every 5 or 6 years, and when they end up going to a different recipient, obviously there's an impact on the workers providing those services. And so, not tonight, but I hope in the future we can have a conversation around worker retention policies or something that would help us address the impacts that these drivers or operators are going to be experiencing in the coming weeks. So,
All right, duly noted. Thank you. Councilmember Zarin.
Again, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I also have great concerns about driver retention and the continuity of the drivers, not just for the driver's sake, but for the customer's sake. And that was my biggest concern going into this. And I want everybody to know that I'll vote no for
Okay.
this.
Any other comments? Councilmember Champ?
Thank you, Chair Zoll. Yes, I too want to stress that as a part of any type of transition plan, that if we decide to agree with what is being proposed, that it does include worker retention, preservation of jobs, allowing people to maintain their full-time jobs. I do know that a part of our process is to have a transition plan, and that transition plan would include ways to get workers retained. So I'm imagining and hoping and expecting that we'll continue to do that, and we will do our due diligence to have those current drivers transferred over.
Any additional comments? Oh, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you. I'll be voting no on this and the following business items. I'd agree with the recommendations and our comments that are in the document attached to this item from Councilmember Ferguson around the importance of having one process that we follow for things. If we need to amend that process should be amended to follow. But my reasons for voting no is that one of the things that I've asked for in many and on a number of occasions and just really think is important is that we have clear workforce and equity information related to the Thrive lens in every single project we have come before us. These were same week items, so we didn't have that opportunity of a give and take, if you will, with staff, and that makes that even more important. But if equity is going to be a part of the lens that we're supposed to be applying to our work, it should be explicitly talked about and divulged in order for the public to also be able to see what we're doing and the actions we're taking or not taking as a result of that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Hudson.
Sorry, I also meant to say, I just wanted to thank the regional administrator, Nick Thompson, Dave Tyson. When these same week items come up, we learn about them on a Friday afternoon pretty late, and if we're concerned about them, we call the staff, and I know they put a fair amount of work into this over the weekend and on Monday, so just grateful for our staff responding to those concerns.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. There was a motion and a second, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, duly noted. And brings us to one more item. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2020-79 is the same week item for the St. Paul and Anoka County Transit Service Contract 19P363. This contract is a 5-year agreement for regular route transit service, including routes 16, 17, and 84 in St. Paul and 801, 805, and 831 in Anoka County. A request for proposals was issued on December 19, 2019. There were 12 plan holders and 3 proposals were received on January 28, 2020. Proposals were evaluated by a panel consisting of MTS, Metro Transit, MnDOT, and Anoka County. Proposals were evaluated for proposal quality, proposers' qualifications and experience, proposers' capabilities, and ability to complete the work, and proposal price. The panel determined that First Transit Incorporated submitted the proposal most advantageous to the council. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a contract with First Transit Incorporated to provide regular route transit service under the St. Paul and Anoka County Contract 19P363 from June 14, 2020 through June 30th, 2025 in an amount not to exceed $27,995,290.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. Now it takes us to the joint report of Environment and Community Development Committees. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm testing you all today. The following 2 business items are comprehensive plans for communities connected to the regional wastewater system and were heard in Community Development and Environment Committees prior to this meeting. For both communities, council staff found that the 2040 plans conform to regional system plans, are consistent with council policies, and are compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. The first item is business item 2020-18 to authorize the 2040 comprehensive plan for the city of Eagan. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. 1, authorize the city of Eagan to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect. 2, revise the city's forecast upward as shown in Table 1 of the attached review record. 3, review the city's sewer service forecasts upward as shown in Table 2 of the attached review record. And 4, advise the city to implement the housing comments in the review record for forecasts, land use, and housing. And the recommendation from the Environment Committee is to approve the City of Egan's comprehensive sewer plan.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, question? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is adopted.
And the next business item is 2020-19 to authorize the 2040 comprehensive plan for the City of Mare. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. Number 1, authorize, these are the recommendations of the Community Development Committee. Authorize the City of Mare to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect. Number 2, advise the City of Mare that the council has reviewed the remainder of the plan and has found no regional system conformance or policy consistency issues at this time. The city does not have the legal authority to plan and zone for areas within Camden, Hollywood, and Waconia townships identified in the staging plan for 2040 growth, the 2040 growth boundary map, figure 6 of this report, as tentative stage 1. Be advised that in the absence of an OAA, the city may not put those portions of the plan into effect at this time. At such time as the City of Mare acquires jurisdictions of the lands planned for future urbanization in township areas, either through an orderly annexation agreement or annexation by ordinance, the city will need to submit appropriate plan amendments to the council for further review and action. Number 3, any authorization of the City of Mare's plan by the council refers only to the 2040 planning period, and any references to post-2040 or beyond 2040 growth areas are not included in any actions taken by the council. Be advised that the city may not put those portions of the plan into effect. 4, advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for surface water management, land use, and water supply. And with one recommendation of the Environment Committee, number 1, approve the City of Mare's comprehensive sewer plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That plan is accepted. So now with other business, there is the first item is the council member committee assignments. They are outside and published form, so I won't read them all. They are posted, but I will thank all the committee council members who are on committees, and especially the chairs of those committees. You'll find some great consistency with what they've been this past year. I have the feeling as a council we're still kind of learning and getting into our stride, so hopefully we've honored everybody's interest. But also I really thank you for this committee work, because it really is, as we've seen, where a lot of the hard lifting and our attention is given. I will say, as now a full participant in the public sector, that it does take a lot of work. It's a great honor, but I know it goes without saying that attending meetings and going to all the council activities is really essential, and that's what kind of keeps us going. I will just make a comment that we have had some attendance issues. I really implore everybody to try to attend committee meetings. If we don't have quorums, then it really slows down and makes it an extra burden for staff. I was recently talking to a park board commissioner, and they said their meetings go until 10, and they have had attendance problems which appear in the press. So I am steadfast that we will not be like that, but we will also not meet until 10. So you have my word. So is there a motion to accept the committee assignments?
So moved.
Mr. Chair,
Thank
I
you.
move to adopt the committee assignments as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. Now, we have an information item. the Metropolitan Council Small Business Program Review. Elaine Ogilvy and Tracy Jackson will join us, and we look forward to your presentation. Welcome.
You can see. Good afternoon. We want to thank you for inviting our Office of Equal Opportunity to come. We're really excited to bring that foundation of our 2 small business programs that we have here at the council. And before we get, I just want to acknowledge that your interest and support that in our small business programs really help when it flows down to our employees here at the council. So thank you for that. I'm Tracy Jackson, the Senior Manager of Office of Equal Opportunity, and I'm here with Elaine Ogilvy, the Supervisor of Small Business. And I want to recognize our director here, Cy Jordan, who are under her direction. So today we are going to start by walking you through the 2 small business programs. So DBE is the first one, so I'll walk you through that. And then Elaine will be talking about the MCUB program. And here we go. So to start out with the basics and the foundation here, so DBE is that federal certification and program from USDOT, the Department of Transportation. So in order to be eligible to become a DBE, you have to be at least 51% owned and controlled by a socially and economically disadvantaged. So there's 2 ways to do it. Socially and economically, you have to qualify with both. And so the presumed groups that are socially disadvantaged are the women, Black, Hispanic, Native, and Asian Americans. And other individuals can also apply for that who qualify as socially and economically disadvantaged on a case-by-case. And then the economic piece, so they have to be a small business. According to the Small Business Administration, they have to have an average of 3-year gross receipts less than 23.98 million. And then their personal net worth is 1.32 million, which does not include their primary residence. Next one, talk a little bit about the program and how to apply. So we're part of, so in Minnesota here, there's 4 partners that work together to certify the DBEs in the entire state. So it's Met Council, MnDOT, the Airport Commission, and the City of Minneapolis. So the 4 partners, we get together every 2 weeks to certify DBEs. We receive these applications and perform that. And Elaine was going to talk a little bit about how many applications we've been receiving to give us an idea. So in 2019, Met Council alone certified 55 companies as DBEs. That's normal. The small business unit has a team of 5. And so that's about one certification per person per month.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Oh, please. Councilmember Zara.
Thank you. I was just wondering, how long is that certification in an effort for? Or how long do they have to before they have to reapply and for certification?
Okay. Chair, Council Members Aaron. So they have, once they submit an application, as long as it's complete and they submit all their documentation, we have up to 90 days to certify a firm.
Is that answering your question?
No.
Okay.
Well, if I could clarify, because I've lived in this world at MnDOT, are you regularly assessing whether they have, the word isn't graduated, but it is, do they still qualify? And so how long does that last until they're reviewed?
Chair and Council Member, so for that, yes, we do. So each year we have an annual, we call no change certification, where they have to fill out an affidavit to identify that they still meet with the socially and economically. So, and yes, there are firms that no longer meet due to either their personal net worth or their gross receipts that exceed that 23.98 million.
Right.
Not so many, but there are a few.
Can I have a follow-up
Yes,
question,
please.
if I could? The gross receipts, is that that number is not something that we arbitrarily took out of the thin air? Where does that number come from? And is that it seems like when the economy happens and it expands, that number should move upwards at some point. Can you give any comment on that?
Sure, Council Chair and Council Member. Yes, that is part of the USDOT regulation for the DBE program, that's the dollar amount. It has been that way. Elaine, maybe you can speak to if it has been increased in.
Chair, council member, it did increase in 2014. So federal regulation for the DBE program follows the SBA size standards. So when that changes, the regulation changes with it. So
Thank you
in
for that.
2014, it bumped up to, it was 21 million, I believe, and it jumped up to the 23.
And as I understand, this is a federal program, which means if there's any federal dollars in a project, it applies.
That is correct.
But if there's no federal dollars, we have a state program. Okay.
And Chair, we will be covering that in the upcoming
I want to
slides.
skip ahead. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry.
So we'll
Please
talk a
proceed.
little bit on how they apply. So I just pulled up the mnucp.org. That's the website for the Minnesota DBE program, and this shows how they can go online and apply for the program. So they can do online, they can call us, we can mail them a paper copy. Our staff helps them to assist them in filling out. It is a lot of paperwork. We do ask for 3 years of taxes, their personal and their business taxes, and their personal net worth form. So there is a lot of information for that.
Can you click on that portal?
Yep, I'm gonna try to see if we can get there. So this is one way of doing that. And then we wanna click on the portal, which is another opportunity.
Many of you have maybe heard about the Minnesota One portal, and that's what this looks like. So firms can certify to be a DBE, they can certify or they can apply for the state of Minnesota Targeted Group Business Program here and City of St. Paul's CERT program. They can apply for one or all at the same time.
Let me see if I can, and then there was one other, I wanted to click on the actual DBE directory and what that looks like. So again, that is housed in mnucp.org. This is the directory, which is a searchable directory. So when our contractors are looking, when we set goals on how to meet that, they can search it by business description, the name. They can look it up by NAICS code or the type of scope where they can identify and run a report. And then it identifies, if I click on one of them, I'll that one here. This gives you an idea of what information is then provided. This is a public facing directory.
And while Tracy's doing that, I'll just add that Met Council staff or small business unit manages this directory. So every 2 weeks, there's a committee that gets together and certifies firms. And that information, one of my staff then uploads all that information in this directory. Any changes, additions, we manage everything. This is also the technical aspect of this directory is managed by our IS staff. So this is Met Council's pride.
And so you see the business listing here. It provides the name, address, email, website if there is one. It does give the ethnicity and then their NAICS codes as well as their business description and who certified them. Okay, and then I will get back to, that worked well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the administration of the program. So again, let's see if so we have how it applies. So Chair Zelli, you just mentioned what does the DBE program apply to? So here at the council, we have the FTA funds through Metro Transit and then the EPA for our environmental services projects. So anytime those federal dollars are included, that's when the DBE program applies. And then elements of this, we set a triennial goal, which we'll get into a little bit further. We set project-specific goals. We have the contract oversight, and then we have reporting. And okay, next we'll go into triennial goal. Elaine.
So the triennial goal, it's called a triennial goal because we set it every 3 years, but it really, what it means is that's going to be our goal, our annual goal that we look at and we try to hit on an annual basis. So this committee is going to get the opportunity to vote on the next triennial goal, which will come around this summer, probably end of July. I'll be before you again with what we propose the EPA goal to be and what we propose the FTA goal to be. Currently, the goal for FTA is 15%, so that's what we try to hit on an annual basis, and we have hit it the last several years. EPA, the goal is 14%, and again, that's been achieved on a regular basis. Basically, how the triennial goal is calculated is we get a forecast of what projects are going to be coming up for the next 3 years, both in transit and environmental services. We take a look at those contracts, we break it down by industry code or work scope. We break out the dollar values in terms of, for all, we get an idea, and I'll just give you an example of, for concrete, what dollar value in concrete are we going to have in all of these projects, and how many firms do we have that are certified to do this concrete work. And we start calculating that against how many firms are actually available to do the work. In the end, it comes out that there's a calculation, we get a base goal, and then we start factoring other things like market change or market conditions. If there happens to be no Southwest Light Rail is going to be a factor because so many contractors are currently working on that project. It does affect our availability of firms on other projects. So just something we have to consider. Other historical disparities are considered. You've heard about the disparity study, so some of that information will be brought into and considered when we look to set this triennial goal. Basically, in about, there is a public comment period as well, but again, the goals are due August, so you will be seeing me again in July, and yeah.
Okay, so with the goals, we have the triennial goal, which is currently 15% is our overall goal right now. Part of that is what we call race gender conscious and race gender neutral. So speaking about the conscious part first, that's when we consciously are setting a goal on procurement. So when we see these procurements coming through, we're consciously setting that on that project, and then we monitor that. And then for race neutral, this is where this program measures and assists us in all small businesses. So when we unbundle the large contracts and eliminating restrictive requirements in solicitations, technical assistance, and bonding requirements. This race gender neutral is how it's counted. So if we have a DBE that is bidding on a project and they are awarded as a prime contractor, so it's not a goal, it's not that subcontracting goal that we're setting, but they actually achieve the award of as being the prime on that project, that is considered race neutral.
And I will just add that federal regulation, they require, or their expectation is that you try to meet as much of your annual goal with race neutral measures. So race neutral measures is, race conscious is everything that you can't achieve using race neutral. That is hard to do. Our current goal of 15%, 13% of that is race conscious. 2% is race neutral. And that's what we've been able to achieve on a consistent basis.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we have an idea, are we tracking the number of firms that could qualify as prime across the different types of things that we do business in the state or in the region? Does that make sense? Like, are we looking to see, like you do with the EEO kind of data, like what's the possible people in the field that could take a job? Is there that kind of, do we have that kind of knowledge of the number of vendors who could be eligible for prime status on something?
Chair, council member, so we don't have actual data. What I will tell you is there's a significant amount of firms out there that have the potential to be primes. Right now, we have a small number that are bidding as prime. But that's where we come in, and we need to get them from where they're at right now to get them to where they are comfortable bidding as prime.
Just a clarifying question. I guess what I'm asking is, do we have like a list of there's 100 companies out there that we could be doing business with who are eligible or able to function as primes? Do we know who they are? Or do we not have like a list of?
No, we don't really have a list because honestly, a lot of them could if they wanted to, or if I think if they had better resources maybe, and maybe I'm not saying that, maybe resources isn't the best word. I think there's not a list of firms that are at that level right now. We just don't have that, but I think there's a lot that are this close from getting to that next step to be at that level.
But they're no longer
No, there's
DBEs.
Mr. Chair, they're still DBEs.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
They are just bidding on as subcontractors.
Right.
Just a question.
Councilmember Ferguson.
So, but if we have a contract that says it's $50 million, if they win that bid, they're almost instantly not a DBE unless they do no other business for 3 years. Right? So if a lot of our contracts that are in this group are larger contracts, we almost by definition set it up so that we can't have race neutral awards. Otherwise, they won't be DBEs. Is that?
Chair, council member, that is correct. It's almost like a double-edged sword.
Right.
We want you to be successful, but
Right.
not too successful, because if you are, you're no longer a DBE.
Wow.
And that's not our choice. That's a federal regulation.
Right.
Okay, Elaine, you want to talk about MCUB?
I would love to talk about MCUB. Okay, as many of you know or have heard, the MCUB program is a Met Council. It stands for the Met Council Underutilized Business Program. The program adopts and adheres to the same standards of the federal DBE regulation. It's applicable to all non-federally assisted contracts and procurements. Elements of the MCUB program are very similar to the DBE program in that we have contract goal setting, compliance oversight, council-wide internal goals. We have a sheltered market program, and we do quarterly internal reporting. However, we do not do a triennial goal for MCUB. It's not a requirement because it is a local funded program. Quarterly internal reporting is just our reporting on what the council spends with MCUBs on a quarterly basis. And you will see in your handouts that the report of Q2 through Q4 is in there if you want to take a look. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we set contract goals, and this methodology comes into play after we have touched base. Well, let me say this. Once we have determined if there's subcontracting opportunity in the first place to even set a goal, and sometimes that's a conversation with the project manager. Usually what happens is we request the cost estimate, and that's usually a very complicated document that we take a look at, and we get a good feel for what scopes of work are in this contract. Many times, almost always, we reach out to the project manager to get a better understanding of what it is that we're looking at. We divide it into scopes, and then we attach basically MCUB availability to those work scopes. This probably looks very confusing. I'm going to show you a sample on the next slide. So we really, we take the number of DBEs available and we divide it by the total number of firms in that work scope to come up with a relative availability of these firms. And then it's multiplied by the cost of the item, and then it adds up. I'm going to show you, if Tracy, if you want to, this is just a sample. This is going to make a whole lot more sense to you. So we'll take the work scopes and we will put them in a spreadsheet. The values are separated out. We basically assign the NAICS code to the work scope, find out how many MCUBs or DBEs are certified in that scope, divide it by the total number of firms that across the state that are in that scope. And this is not something that we created. This is something that is coming from FTA, FHWA. This is a recommended calculation template. This is, if you look at this is primarily in a small version how we set the triennial goal. So this mirrors that, which makes sense because our annual goal is what we're striving for when we set contract goals.
Mm-hmm.
So once we come with a base goal, then again, we start making adjustments. You know, we know our DBEs, we take a look at the market. Does it make sense to increase this? We're trying to hit our annual goal. So for a project like this, it's 7%. There's a possibility we would increase it to 10, maybe even 15, depending on what we see. So.
Okay, next we want to talk about when there's not an opportunity. I'm really hoping to address some of the questions and the concerns that we've heard from Councilmember Atlas Engelbretson and Ferguson in regards to what happens, or we're seeing too many things come through as business items that are showing that there was no goal set. So when we receive the initiation memo from the project manager that goes through, we look at that. First, we identify what type of funding is there. Is it federal funding or is it state and local funding? That kind of determines is it DBE or MCUB. Then we look at what are the subcontracting opportunities. And so we have to identify, first of all, is there any DBEs or MCUBs that can do that type of work? And do they have the capacity to do it? So a couple things here. We want you to know that I know the question was asked, who has the authority to set the goal? So our Office of Equal Opportunity, we are the ones who set that goal. You just heard the methodology and how we do that when they have the scopes of work and the subcontracting opportunity. If there is no subcontracting opportunity, what we do, work with the project manager, we challenge them, we look at the project, is this too big? Can you break it down? Are you sure there's no subcontracting opportunities on here? They're the experts or the SMEs in their area, so we just want to make sure that we're understanding and making sure. So before that we write, no, there's no goal here, then we've exhausted all of our options, whether there should be a goal set or not. So if we've identified there is no goal, then we say, if it's a small project, I want to give you an example. So we had some real estate or some appraisal services requested for our Southwest Light Rail project. So what do? There's no subcontracting opportunity. They're going to hire one appraiser to go out and appraise so many of the properties. So what we did is we ran a search in our DBE directory. Yes, do we have DBEs that can do that work? Absolutely. So what we do is we run that report. Procurement and OEO, we've reached out to them. We call them, are you interested? Hey, this opportunity is coming up if you're willing and wanting to propose on this project. So we've had success there. I know we did have a success story, and DBE was awarded some of the appraisal services on Southwest. And that goes for all projects. I know at the Transportation Committee just recently we had the new chairs or seating for the trains. Again, we don't have any DBEs that do that type of work. We looked at, can we break it down? And there was just no opportunities there. There was no availability of DBEs to bid that, so there was no goal. I know the question was, can we have these project managers that are bringing their business items, can we have them right in there? And I know you're very strong about making sure that language is in there. If there's no goal, then why? So, but just know and be assured that OEO is looking at all of that to make sure that there should be a goal, and if there is no goal, that we are at least challenging and ensuring and making sure, and if there is opportunity, we're reaching out to them directly where they can actually propose or bid at that time.
Councilmember Atlas Engelbretson.
Thank you. I appreciate you being really direct and being responsive to the concerns brought up. I think there's two things that maybe we'll hear about this other places, and young man who spoke earlier today, I'm so interested in hearing yeses because we just get a lot of no's. So, I'm not a millennial, but I'll channel that for today. I just want to hear some yeses because we have to do things differently for things to change. We can't just keep doing things the same way and expecting a different outcome, or be so invested in maintaining our system that we don't realize our outcomes are systematized. Like our system is great at giving us the outcomes we have right now. So we have to figure out how to do things differently. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but what I'm hearing, and I think what we're seeing is that for a project manager, sometimes managing a project's tough, right? Like I've done that portion of my career. It's not an easy job to do. No one's job's really easy, but it's a hard job. And sometimes this feels like this added thing put on you to do. And so I just wonder, are there things we could do to better assist, train, support, develop excellent project managers who know how to break down a project so that more subcontractors can be involved, so that we can have more DBE goals? And I wonder if that might be one of those things that instead of just saying, hey, do it, maybe, and it's hard to say on the other end, I don't know how to do that well, right? I think I'm really great at my job. I work really hard, and now I have to do this thing I don't know how to do well. That's hard to kind of come around and say. We have a lot of phenomenal staff. So I'm just wondering, like, is that something that would be valuable and beneficial for us to make sure that's in place for a professional development perspective, is really showing project managers how to break down a project and integrate these practices into the work? Thanks, Chair.
Chair, council member, I love that. I'd love to explore that because by the time our office gets the information, it's already packaged,
Truly.
ready to go, goal or no goal. So to be more proactive, yes, I would love to see some support that way, whether it's just messaging, working with our project managers around the council to see if there's something we can do. And I mean, we've talked with them and talked about breaking apart projects, and we have sent them back and said, well, we believe this can be broken apart.
I think this is, Chair, if I
Go ahead.
can, there's these really specific tactics that can be employed at different levels throughout an organization to advance equity. And one of those pieces is making sure in the different types of employment positions that there are specific, realistic, real things that they can do in their role to advance equity work. So that would be a real thing that could be integrated into a performance objective and standard for project managers, is their ability to break down projects at the right level to be able to allow the full community to participate in the scopes of those projects. Those are some of those just tactical, really simplistic things. Sounds simple, but getting explicit, I think, gives people a lot of tools to be successful in something instead of just hearing be the jerk up here saying, I'm voting no. How do we get that to a place where they can feel, I know what to do to be successful and to say yes, I guess. Thanks.
Have you, go ahead, Councilmember Ferguson.
So just a question back on the goal methodology. When we calculate the total number of Minnesota firms available, how do we calculate that?
Chair, council member, that comes from the Minnesota Census Bureau,
So,
broken down by NAICS code.
so if a minority firm is not registered, that's not included in the DBE. But if a company is not, I feel like we're sort of overweighting, right? So if we said only firms in the bottom would be ones that have registered with us to do business, that would change that ratio substantially, right? So we're putting an onus on minority firms to register to be included in the top number, but everybody is included in the bottom number, right? So by our nature, in doing it that way, we are underrepresenting the number of that ratio, which is the key ratio in determining whether or not what the goal should be and whether or not we even have a goal. So the top number should be the census number as well, as opposed to just the registered firms for those two numbers to be equivalent, or the bottom number should only be firms that are registered to do business with us in that particular space. Otherwise, we're using two very different sets of data, and that is sort of the key determinant as to what we set our goals at. And I think that may be one of the reasons why we're struggling with some of these things, right? It's the wrong data set.
Chair, council member, I definitely appreciate that feedback, and you're right. I think that we can definitely look and play around with that and see what that looks like. I just want to clarify, when you say firms that are registered to do business with this, you mean the Met, registered with the Met Council, or?
Yeah, or you do census data for both, right? And just say the top number is all minority-owned firms, women-owned firms in the state of Minnesota via census data. How does that compare to the total number of firms, as opposed to saying the DB registered firms, right? Because then we would say, let's say, because there's a lot of firms that choose not to register, right? So that underrepresents them in the top number, which underrepresents the goal, right? When if we know, let's say the goal should be 25%. We just don't have enough firms because only 1 out of 100 have chosen to register with us for whatever reason that is. We need to go out and find a way to get the others, encourage the others, find a way to get the others to do business with us. And so just as I think about sort of the structure of how we do that, and you think some of these basic reasons why some of the things, to Councilmember Atlas Ingwerts's point, some of these things propagate, right? If we don't think about sort of some of those basics, it really changes the numbers that you would expect to see. So
I agree, and I think that the calculation is just how it's a tool to at least get us to a base, to at least get us an idea, to give us a number, and that's where 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10, actually, we adjust that up because we know that that is a very low number, and it can be. We know what's out there and what can be achieved.
Has our goals been fairly consistent, or where have they been over the past few years? Give us a sense.
Mr. Chair, so in terms of our annual goal, our triennial
Yes.
goal, we have hit 15% for the last several years.
That's about what we have set based on our. Yeah, I'm curious, and we could take this offline, but I know from MnDOT we had outside economists, Dr. Myers, doing surveys, doing work, and we're doing it in-house. And I'm wondering, to address Councilmember Ferguson's idea, that there's actually quite a bit of methodology to it, and I know you probably learned through that process, but when we do it ourselves, do you sense that we've got all, is that an extra burden, or has that been working well, or? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it is painful.
Yeah.
To say the least. It's painful, and you're right. It's a lot of data that just our in-house staff is sorting through and trying to do our best to get the best number that's reflective of the intent is to reduce disparities through our triennial goal. So I completely agree with you and would be more than willing to have that conversation.
And I think we should continue to think about ways to not burden you, but to get toward what we think is a fair, aspirational, but achievable goal for where we are. Yeah.
Sure. Our friends at DEED may have data. I know when we fill out our annual business registration, right, you put in your category and you have, it's an optional choice, but it might be better than just the people that have registered with the council. But we may find other data sources that are available that would lessen the burden on you guys, on your team.
And in certain categories like professional, technical, there's more opportunities and less so on some of the others. I know it's challenging, but it's helpful that you're committed to, and we are committed to help advance that work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Curiosity question on the DBE and CUB firms getting access to opportunity. I think it would be useful to have information that comes from those that are on the list that are looking for opportunities and what their barriers and challenges are. Perhaps, they don't have the time to ramp up, to get the materials, to get their workforce together. It would be nice when we're having, discussions like this to get that information.
So we don't want to burden you. I know you have more presentation.
We're getting there.
Again there, okay. I don't want
Okay.
to stop you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the contract compliance. So once we get the goal set, then we go into full action to ensure that the contractor or the consultant is then meeting these goals. So what we do is, as the bids and proposals come in, we do an evaluation. We determine do they pass or fail the DBE or MCUB goal. So that decision is made, and then once it is awarded, then we attend the pre-construction meeting or the kickoff meeting to enforce that commitment that they've committed to at time of bid. We monitor participation by reviewing the monthly progress reports. We monitor payments. We do pay verification, saying, okay, the contractor said that they paid you $500,000. Have you received that? So we do that, making sure they're getting paid promptly. Site visits, our staff, in addition to our construction staff, do site visits out in the field, and we also do office visits with the DBEs and MCUBs to make sure that there's no concerns or any issues on the projects. We also, again, the payments, and then we do a closeout of achievement. So that's our contract compliance.
All right, and this is wrapping up the MCUB portion of it, and Tracy's going to talk about workforce after this, but growth and sustainability, and this is a piece that's very exciting to me. We have spent a lot of time the last few years thinking about MCUB, how to grow MCUB, just thoughts behind it, and then we got ready to make a move and do some big changes and realize that we need to get our house in order. We needed to start thinking about how we do reporting differently and get our technology in order. And I feel like we're in a really good spot. So we are taking next steps. I am putting together what's called an MCUB sustainability team. Now that we feel like we're in a good spot, now's the time to start thinking about how are we going to continue to grow and sustain this program 1, 3, 5 years from now. So this team will be persons from my small business team, Tracy, and persons from procurement, contracts, and purchasing will collaborate together to create a strategic plan that is going to cover basically everything from A to Z, from in-house procurement processes, internal training, external outreach, resources that we need, potential future technology that may be helpful. We're going to lay it all out in a strategic plan and review it and see what makes sense. Eventually, it probably will come to you. But I feel like we have gotten so much support from this council. I feel that now is the time. You keep asking, what do you need? Or what do we need from you? So we're going to get it all together and figure out what exactly we need from you. So this team is getting together within the next couple weeks to kick off. And so more information to come. I'm hoping to, through the management committee, give updates on where we're at with that. We're also going to start capitalizing on internal opportunities. So this is separate from the team that I just mentioned. My staff every year creates goals and objectives for the year, and this is part of one of their goals is to take more proactive steps in working with project managers to analyze forecasts and see where MCUB opportunities lie, where we can do that sheltered market, what potentially would be direct solicitations, and try and get on top of it instead of always being maybe reactive to the opportunity. We are going to analyze those MCUB reports that I just mentioned that we do on a quarterly basis. We actually run every single item that's spent with the council and separate it and look to see, was there a potential office item that was bought that could have been done through an MCUB but wasn't. And we really are getting into the finite details and working with purchasing to follow up on those types of missed opportunities. They're small, but when you start adding them up, it becomes significant. So we'll continue to do that. And it was great timing with what Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen said, in that one of our goals is to work more closely with the project managers, to work with them to analyze what could be potentially broken out into smaller scopes, or you just get them to think more about where the small business opportunities lie as they're planning these projects.
Okay, then I'm going to talk a little bit about the targeted outreach. So SAI is really wanting me to focus my efforts on connecting and targeting outreach and small business inclusion. So one of the areas, so the targeted outreach for certification, we're looking at industry gaps and ethnicities that we're looking to increase. So we know as we're developing our plan, we know we need more women of color businesses. And so that is one of the areas we're going to be, has been identified already. I'm going to talk a little bit about the targeted scope here, the technical information sessions. So we are working with environmental services and transit right now. We've identified a few areas, purchasing furniture. I'm connecting one of our small businesses to get an opportunity because they're like, well, we buy all the furniture from one vendor and we have to stay with that on the state list. And we're like, are there any other opportunities? That's where we go that little extra step and say, what other opportunities are there? There's other buildings here at the Met Council that we can look for those opportunities. And so there is, and we found that list and we have connected them. Duct cleaning, it's these small little projects that are perfect bite-sized pieces for our DBEs and MCUBs to come in. So duct cleaning, snow plowing. We're going to bring folks in. So we're going to do some education here. You know, we've tried a few times. There was some, concerns we had before if they didn't have the right equipment. So we're going to do some education. We're going to bring them in. So if you're a DBE or MCUB and you have snow plowing and it says you can do snow plowing, let's bring you in and let's see, can you meet the requirements before you get an opportunity to bid? Can you meet the requirements? Do you have the equipment? Do you have the insurance? So those are the pieces we're going to help educate them, so to give them that opportunity. HVAC is another one. We have specific controls through Honeywell that will be doing a training over at our transfer road station. So that's scheduled for April. And then just other areas, painting, detailed cleaning, carpet cleaning, window washing, and items like that. So we're really kind of kicking off the year with a good start with these smaller pieces that will be tracked and identified when you see these as part of our MCUB goals. And
Sure.
then mentor pro.
So just one
Sure.
comment or question. So just as we look at those requirements like equipment, et cetera, I would just make sure that we really need that. What we found at Hennepin and some other places is that a lot of those requirements were written by the existing provider, and maybe it's a particular piece of equipment that they own that most other organizations don't own, but it was a simple way for them to guarantee they got the business year after year because that was spec. Same thing for things like furniture, et cetera. So Hennepin and for one is changing how they're doing some of that contracting to open it up so they're or requiring furniture manufacturers to open up the number of people. Let's say they have only one company that's allowed to sell their furniture in the state of Minnesota. Either they won't use them or they'll require them to have a minority supplier in the state of Minnesota before they'll be able to, before they'll spec them in a building that they have. So just think about some of those requirements and how they impact.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good point. Thank you. And then just lastly, your capacity building, mentor protege. Currently we have, we're looking at implementing 3 mentor proteges. This is part of the DBE program where we have a prime contractor or a consultant that will be mentoring one of our DBEs. So I just met prior to this meeting, we have one of our ES contractors that will be mentoring one of our DBE painting firms. They're going to learn how to do confined space training. They're going to learn how to do bidding and estimating. There was just kind of a list of, the big pieces were, they know how to paint, but they don't know how to do that industrial painting. They're residential and commercial. So this is an area and opportunity there for them to build and grow their capacity. And so while they're in this agreement, they can get all the training and assistance, but yet still remain independent. And then when they finish their agreement, then they can get an additional business description or a NAICS code to expand that certification. So, and then we are expecting 2 more. We're trying to grow that program as well.
And just a couple more things that we want to mention that we exciting. So what we are doing is an onboarding of newly certified firms. The first one will be May 5th. and it will be at the Wellstone Center. It will be basically in onboarding to firms that are newly certified to get them in, explain to them what the council is, what we do, how to find opportunities. Procurement will be there with us collaborating to help them understand the procurement process. Um, just a really good discussion, couple hours just to get them in, and get them to learn, now that you're certified, now what? And that seems to be the question. And then 6 months from that event, we will follow up with them, and 12 months from that event, we'll follow up with them again to see where they're at and where the need is. So I think that's really going to be key to making sure that these firms don't get certified and just fall off the face of the earth. And last but not least, a Doing Business with the Council Symposium. So we had a Doing Business with the Council event last year. It was only a few hours, but it was so well received that we wanted to expand it. We did a lot of, that takes a lot of time, resources, things like that. Our staff has worked really hard to tighten up their own internal processes to free up some of their time to do things like this. And this, what we're in the very early stages of planning this, so I don't have a whole lot of detail other than the plan is to have it a one-day event, so it's not so burdensome on these small businesses, just one time at a place where there's going to be free parking. And it will cover topics such as best practices for submitting bids and proposals, bonding and insurance, safety plans, finding opportunities, resources, things like that. So we are hoping that there will be an agenda with times, and obviously firms, when they're invited, they can come to the whole day. It's free, so they can come the whole day, or they can just come to business meetings. So this is something that we hope to do on an annual basis, but I'm really excited and looking forward to it. So.
Okay, that is our small business portion. We have just a couple of slides on workforce. We just wanted to touch on that. The Minnesota Department of Human Rights, we're working very closely with them and helping enforce some of the workforce goals here on council-wide projects. Our goals are set for state-assisted construction contracts that are over $100,000. The regional workforce goals are 32% people of color and 20% women. And then just a reminder that it's not like a head count, it's not per person or individual, but it's measured by the number of hours. And then just women of color are counted in each category.
Councilman. Thank you. I think one of the things, I know I've talked about this a lot, but I know that there's the federal guidelines and language that needs to be used as a part of their work. I also just want to keep reminding us, and I'm seeing this more and more in our work, around the importance of when we're using it internally to make sure that we're disaggregating that information and really being able to share. And you guys provided a presentation at some point in the last 8 months
Yes.
around that disaggregated information, where we really saw that there's very specific gaps for particular ethnic groups, and then I also want to just acknowledge that that we include the word Indigenous and inclusive as a part when we're also talking about color. That's important to us here, and I realize. So I think there's a little bit of that thing we have to do to translate the federal or state language sometimes into locally appropriate language, and also for us to be able to really know what that goal translates. What are our sticky wickets, if you will? I don't know if that is that even a thing. Did I make that up?
No,
What are those?
I think that's a word.
Is that a thing? But what are those challenging things for us, so we know African American is a place where we see regular gaps when we see those disaggregated data, and significant, and we see that gap in everything we look at. So I think it's just important to be able to connect those dots across that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Chair and Councilmember Atlas and Goodbretson, I wanted to also address the comment that you made when in one of the emails here, you were wanting to make sure that the business items are including the DBE if there's a goal, and if there's not a goal, why? And then you also mentioned the workforce, or I think Ferguson also did. Wanted to talk about that a little bit, want to maybe explore it a little bit more, but that is an external piece, like for the example of the contract that went through on Monday and then approved tonight. Because workforce goals are set by human rights, and they have the authority and they do the monitoring of construction contracts. And when you're looking at a service contract, which is something different, then we're looking at what their demographics of their workforce is. And I know that's what you were asking. So typically, if we're hiring a contractor, we're not going to, their demographics and their workforce change so rapidly. I do want to speak and address to the subrecipients and the contractors that we work with. Our office is responsible for the oversight of their affirmative action plan that we do receive every 3 years, which has their goals and their hiring in there, but not their current actual workforce. So if that's something you're still wanting to have in regards to being able to vote on the business item.
Sure, if I can respond to that.
Yes.
I think, and I know Councilmember Zarin has talked about this a lot, that MCUB and DB are super important. Workforce is super important too. And I don't know that the structures exist that do. I think if we had the systems in place that do what we need them to do to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate in our workplaces equitably, then we wouldn't need to have this conversation, if you will. So I realize that we've been able to get this information on other types of projects. It's not mandated in those projects either, but it was information that was happy news, if you will, that some of our vendors have been able to do some really exciting things. And I think that in order for us to know what can happen and what is possible, we have to think a little creatively and maybe make something up around this, or even if it's voluntary for people to participate in. And I think that if a vendor has a great story about what they've been able to accomplish around workforce diversity, we want to know that too. We want to celebrate that with them. And I think in in the position of your office and team, it's also I'm sure also, well, you're doing it intentionally, connecting people with mentee-mentor relationships, but there's also just peer learning for one another. And oftentimes the organization that's contracting with the vendor is the one who connects them with another vendor who's might have a challenge or an interesting opportunity or wants to learn from one another. So I just think that this is one of those areas that we're not going to see things be different until we start asking these questions. Doesn't mean they need to be required. Doesn't mean that they need to be even something that is a part of the federal process. If it's illegal for us to ask those questions, that would be one thing. But I think just by asking questions, people start thinking. They start thinking it's valuable. They start seeing, hey, we've been working towards this and we're doing really great. We want to tell that story too. We want people to know what we're able to do around this. Or people start feeling like, hey, maybe we need to do better. People are asking about this. Other people are sharing their success. So you have that peer pressure, for lack of a better word, or competition that can come from that as well. So just pushing us to really think about what can we do? What can we say yes to really move the needle in a measurable way on these things that are really stifling our economic growth in our state and specifically in our region so significantly.
Councilmember Johnson.
And this is deeper in the weeds. So I chair the audit committee. And so, we perform audits on our internal programs, and we have audits that go and we look at our subrecipients, and especially when there's federal funding coming forward. And through that, there were requirements for equal opportunity. I'm just looking at drug and alcohol compliance, Disabilities Act compliance, so especially though around the workforce. By the time it gets to us and there's a problem, it's going through audit, the things are discovered. Our audit team will then work with the subrecipient to get them back to where they need to be. I think though that as it relates to things like this, it would be nice if Met Council managers were leaning in a little bit more, even with our subrecipients, so that we, as we are managing and working out, providing services through others, we are helping to actively keep an eye on some of that too, so that it doesn't show up to the best of our ability, at the audit level. And that's a little piece of it, but, there's money going everywhere. We have responsibility to track that. And I just wonder if there, and I don't know if it would be with you or, well, probably would be with you, but just that, we're doing our best to be proactive wherever we can with those subrecipients too. So that's just my comment on that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember?
Yeah, all right, thank you, Chair. I just had a couple questions at the end that didn't quite get land exactly for me. So I'm kind of wondering is, if we have two equal businesses and there's a business that's a Minnesota business versus like a Florida business, is there any advantage to being a Minnesota business? For example, the scoring as far as like the gender and people of color kind of thing, if everything else is equal, or is it just a total net equality on that?
Chair, council member, I wouldn't say it's an advantage, so to speak. The only difference that I can see as far as Met Council is concerned is the MCUB program requires you to be a Minnesota-based company. So if there are two equal businesses, they were both DBE, but one is a Minnesota firm and one is a Florida firm, only the Minnesota firm can participate in MCUB.
Okay, then I just had a couple more follow-up with it.
Please.
All right, so the other thing is, I noticed we kind of women-owned business, but is it more like is it strictly women, or is it non-male? Like we have some people identify as binary or different genders, not just male, female, and I'm just wondering if they would be considered disadvantaged businesses as well.
You want to take that one, or I can answer it too? Go ahead. Chair, council members, right now it is strictly male-female. However, there is, in the DBE slide, part of the certification is if you're not one of those already presumed groups. So say that you have an individual that's binary and they feel that they've been discriminated against in the marketplace due to that. They can apply under what we call Appendix C, because Appendix C is what chapter it's in the regulation. They can apply under that and still get certified if they meet their burden of showing us that that's what's happening.
Okay, I just had one more, and then
Sure.
Please. All right, so and then I know we have like the person of color versus non-people of color, but is there a point where like there are some of people of color that actually are doing better than white, would that they would no longer qualify at some point, or right now it's just strictly the skin color and ethnic type things that create the business and that? Like for example, like if you look at the study economic, some of the Chinese Asians, for example, or Koreans, typically are doing better economically than white people across the board, for example. So that's what I was kind of wondering about.
Mr. Chair, council members, currently that is a piece of the targeted group business program with the state to be, you can qualify for that program as being economically disadvantaged. That doesn't trickle down to the MCUB program. So it applies some places and other places it does not.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is the last time you guys are gonna hear about this from me. I swear this is true until next year. But I just wanna really encourage people to deeply think about the Forum on Workplace Inclusion. I know it sounds like it's like about your workplace, but I just think so oftentimes when we're having conversations about this type of topics, whether it's diversity and management or inclusive practices, and they're starting to get into equity, that it can be such a hard conversation and people are feeling like they're coming from a place of having a lack of information or resource or support, or just knowledge and opportunity to learn. And it is such a tremendous opportunity. It's right here in Minneapolis. You don't have to stay in a hotel. You can do it as a part of one of your professional development opportunities here. And I swear, if you don't leave that and say that I'm a different person and I feel way better about life after coming to that conference, then I'll take you to dinner. But or maybe I can't do that. That's against the rules, right? I'll give you something that's not really valuable, like a cookie that you could decide to throw away. But I just think I just really want to encourage people, take advantage of that opportunity. I think it can really be a great tool for helping us to advance the conversation together and helping people to feel, and it covers all topics, non-binary, transgender, all disability, all types of intersectionality of all those things, ethnicity, religion is all there. And so I just think it's a great opportunity to be able to learn more about programs like this, how other people are doing them from across the world. And it's right here. So I just really want to encourage people to think about it.
I would just briefly echo and support what Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson has just said. I've gone for a number of years, and it's really been transforming. So it's a great program, and it is international. It's right here, being hosted now by Augsburg. It used to be St. Thomas, but it's a valuable program. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Stern, thanks for your comment. I just wanted to react that it's important to disaggregate by ethnicity because amongst the Asians, there are different demographics of the political history of how and why we ended up here, right? The East Asians, the Japanese, the Chinese, they've been here for over 100 years. The Chinese were here working on the railroads. The Japanese were on the sugarcane plantations in Hawaii. They have generations of wealth on us Southeast Asians as a Hmong person, right? We came here from the Vietnam War. We were lowly foot soldiers in the CIA's secret war in Laos under the Vietnam War theater. And so when we came here, we came after the Vietnamese and the Laotians. And they came here first because they were the higher ups. They were the generals and the diplomats and the prime ministers, and their families came here first. And then we came here 10, 20 years later as the lowly foot soldiers. My father fought in the CIA's secret army as an infantry soldier and in the artillery. And so folks like that, they came last because you're the lowly foot soldiers. And so that's why we have to be conscious and careful about how we disaggregate economics by race and class. And there's a whole bunch of political history behind that too. Thank you.
It's complicated. Thank you for sharing that.
Could I make a comment?
Oh, Sarah?
As somebody who's graduated from an apprenticeship program, I really think highly of apprenticeship. And when we talk about our DBEs and construction services, my question is around: do we track at all the apprenticeships that are being used and the quality of those apprenticeships? Because I know they vary greatly from the investments are vastly different, and there are some sham apprenticeship programs out there that put together a program just enough to be able to meet a goal, and then as soon as that contract is up, that apprenticeship program is no longer funded. Is there anything in our contracts, or do we look at or score the apprenticeship programs in the DPE or MCUP?
It is, yes. So, council member and chair, we do not have any scoring in regards to that, so that's separate. It's workforce. So DBE is where we have that authority and requirement, where workforce does not fall under our authority. So, but we are involved and have this collaboration with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. As part of the Southwest Project, we have a DBE Workforce Advisory Committee where we are talking with the unions and the community-based organizations, and we are asking those same questions about the ratio of the journeyman to the apprenticeships and how we're meeting those goals, and then how do we retain them for future construction careers. instead of letting them go. So it's a big conversation, but in regards to scoring, no.
Thank you.
You know, this is a huge topic. Clearly, we have great interest. I know, not to get totally exhausted in it now, but my experience at MnDOT, we spent a lot of time thinking through the Office of Civil Rights, how do you develop DBEs? And I love the mentoring program, but sometimes it's working capital, sometimes it's business programs. I know DEED has some programs, and you know, we will certainly want to talk more about what we're doing and want to support you in your work, because this is really excellent, and I think it's helpful for us to know that you're committed to it. Any last thoughts? Yes.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, just listening to all the many initiatives and programs that you're working on, I would really like to encourage you to access the Equity Advisory Committee. So the folks there that are from the community have a wealth of experience and knowledge on many of the issues and ideas that you have laid out before us today, but also doing it early enough in your processes so the EAC members can have meaningful impact as opposed to waiting until you're almost done with the work. I think that the members will have input that you might find useful, but that input has to come in early in the process so you can incorporate that if appropriate into the way you're working. So we have new members that were just appointed at the last council meeting. So you have a brand new batch of highly qualified folks that will be happy to work with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation, and we will be interested in your progress and in a future meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
We now have time for some reports. I will just be brief in saying two things. One is had a great opportunity myself to talk with all staff meeting here in this room this morning. What a great committed group we have at Met Council. It's often we see some of the leadership, we see some programs, but we often see just the tip of the iceberg. So and speaking of those on the front line, I want to alert you to the Happy Transit Driver Appreciation Day. I think that's March 18th, if I got that right. But I'm going to Hayward tomorrow to also meet with the staff there, and you know, and I couldn't say enough about the people on the front line of our civil society here, and that's I call them operators because they're actually driving the bus, but they're our ambassadors. There are security officers. There are part-time mechanics. They're ticket takers. They're everything, you know. And so I think we're doing a lot more now to help support those that are representing us. Anybody have any reports?
I would like to give a report if I could.
Yes.
Mr. Chair. One of my favorite organizations, charity that I've contributed to and been a part of is Bikes for Kids. And I have some flyers if I can pass these around. Sure. I'll keep one for myself here. So I recently sat down with the executive director, Al Santaroot, who Bikes for Kids is an organization that takes bicycles in on donation, and they fix the bikes up and give them to children and to kids and people of need. And it's an organization that I've spent many hours in their shop. It's not to be confused with, thank you, Free Bikes for Kids. That's a different organization that seems to get all the press. Free Bikes for Kids has gotten some press that actually was Bikes for Kids. This is an organization out of Ham Lake that's in my district. And you can, I think in there, it shows the growth of bikes that they've taken in on donation. They don't sell bikes. They feel like it's a disservice to their mission to sell a bike to be able to fund the system, so they take donations. And right now, they're working on, they also train people. Right now, they're looking for 2 cohorts of 10 people that would want to volunteer their time to learn how to rebuild bikes and get them up to like new condition. Their standard for being able to give a bike away is very high. It has to be fully operational. They give a bike helmet, a bike lock to people of need, and they don't just give out bikes. There has to be a sponsoring organization to give a bike out. Social services or church or and say these folks are in need. It's a really great program. They also ship several thousand bikes a year to Gambia, which is very unique that some of the volunteers put that together. There's so they send bikes out, and the bikes end up being recycled, reused, and it really helps to for people. Maybe a car is not an option, but a bicycle is. It gives them one more step to move forward in the economic cycle of prosperity. So with that, I want everybody to know about the organization, and if you have a bike to donate, they have drop-off sites, or if you know of an organization, folks that need can kind of connect and make the business happen of getting wheels underneath kids. I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other reports?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just briefly, everybody has Minnesota's housing scorecard in front of them. That's something that Prosperity's Front Door has been working on for several months. We released it yesterday. It's high-level data. Nothing would surprise this group. But at the same time, we're pushing it out so that we not only, work with the housing leaders, the housing coalitions, the housing organizations, but we're really working to build support with other sectors. So the business community is starting to step up. And we've seen that certainly through Governor Walz's leadership, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan's leadership in calling the business community to help pitch in, certainly around homelessness. But this, we all know, is a moral imperative, but it's an economic imperative for our region and our state. So again, it's high-level data, but if you log on to our website, you can see a 54-page report. And really what that's all about is telling stories from around the state of innovation, hard work, perseverance. We really want to celebrate those stories. I know many of you are engaged in this work. If you have things that you'd like us to highlight and amplify, please share those with me through our website or email me directly at my work. We just really want to build awareness and help build the movement beyond we've got currently so that we can make change, because we're at a tipping point and we need to act now. And so again, it's really great working with all of you in this role at Met Council because we're all there. But it's going to need a lot more support and people joining in solutions.
Well, and I appreciate that one of Prosperity's Front Door's mission is to get it out in front of with the awareness of the crisis we're facing, and thank you for that, and we're part of that at Met Council.
Yep.
Councilman Fetzi.
Thank you, Chair. St. Paul Chamber of Commerce annual meeting is tomorrow night, so just wanted to flag that for folks. And then on the subject of apprenticeship, my day job at Lyon, Minnesota, North Dakota, we're proud to have the largest and most diverse apprenticeship program in the state of Minnesota, and we have our apprenticeship graduation tomorrow night, so congratulations to all of our graduates.
Yeah. Councilmember.
So,
Atlas.
thank you. Last week, I was able to attend the Minnesota Council of Foundations conference, and a significant topic in a number of sessions was addressing housing instability, and a number of speakers and times it came up the need to partner with the public sector and not knowing how to do that. So, I reached out to a few. There's a number of tables that are forming. There's one that our organization hosts around young people. I know that our staff is working hard. I just think there's that need to figure out how do we partner between philanthropy and make sure that we're sharing. I think one of the most valuable things is sharing the information that we have. Because there's people are getting a little bit from different sources, but not really able to put together necessarily the full picture. So I just think that was something that they were talking a lot about. Met Council came up a number of times in that context. So it was a good conversations, but a lot of work for us all to do.
Right. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Regional Administrator, anything?
Mr. Chair, I will just say we've had some inquiries about coronavirus pandemic planning. Not necessarily a big scary topic. We want to tackle it 5 after 6. So I'll just say information is coming, but know that staff have pandemic plans as part of our larger continuity of operations and disaster recovery planning efforts as required by executive order of the governor. And so we continue that work, and we've got some really great folks in place who are skilled at that. So more to come.
In the meantime, wash your hands.
Yes.
Okay, Council, nothing? All righty. Then 5 after 6, nearly on time. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?